Good afternoon and welcome everyone. I am Upasna and on behalf of TIE Delhi NCR, I extend a really warm welcome to all of you today. We all know that this is a very difficult time. Uh, we all are in the storm. As people say, we are in the same storm, we may not be in the same boat. Some of you are gravely impacted, some of you are less impacted, but practically all of us are impacted by the force of this pandemic, especially in the second wave. So, keeping in mind this aspect, we have picked up today the topic, and the topic is going to be talking about cultural wellness in specifically today's time. Uh, we have with us here today Harshal Mathur from Razorpay. He's the co-founder of Razorpay, and this is a part of our Unicorn Founders Workshop that has comes to you through Capital Circle. TIE Delhi NCR, Microsoft have come together to create Capital Circle. We will be talking more about that as we go into this. Uh, Gautam will be taking you through that. But welcome all of you. And before we go into the workshop itself, I would like to first bring on Gautam. Gautam will talk to you about the Capital Circle, and then eventually we will have go over to our board member Sandeep Sinha, who is also the managing partner of Loomis Partners, to talk to you about the various initiatives that TIE Delhi NCR is undertaking in order to help founders impacted by the pandemic in various ways. So over to Gautam. Gautam, please take this forward.
Thank you so much, Upasana, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. The first session of Capital Circle, and what better way to start than with Harshal and the amazing story of Razorpay. So thank you so much, Harshal as well, Harshal and Sandeep for joining us. While we get into the session, I would want to take a couple of minutes, without making you guys wait, on what is Capital Circle all about? Because incidentally, we are allowing you guys to hear about Capital Circle for the first time today through this session as well, right? It's a soft launch of Capital Circle. So Capital Circle is a program from Microsoft and TIE Delhi NCR. It is our initiative to work very closely with VCs and Ps here in India as well as rest of APAC. The intention was to work closely with funds and their portfolio startups in their journey. Just a minute, I'm going to put up something on screen to help you guys visualize what we're talking about. One second. Okay, perfect. So the idea was to work very closely with VCs to help your portfolio startups in their journey. Right? As a part of it, the idea was to run a series of sessions as a part of the program. One of this is your unicorn founder workshops or deep dives that we are kickstarting with Harshal. Many such sessions where we get to work very closely or interact very closely with unicorn founders are slated for the coming weeks and months. So, as a part of it, we would have multiple deep dives where we would go into both the industry segments at Microsoft as well as listen to entrepreneurs who've built it, been there, done that, and hear from them on key areas while starting up. And one such topic today is where we are getting into the culture and wellness as you scale a startup, and who better than Razorpay, in their journey of becoming a unicorn from 5 years back when they started in a tier two city like Jaipur. So, on that note, I want to quickly also bring up something on screen, which is at the moment we've got on board about 30 funds that have been onboarded as member partners for Capital Circle. So we are currently pausing this with probably a few more. The idea was it is going to be with just these funds and their portfolio startups that we would work very closely with as Microsoft, bring in our expertise on helping their startups build better technologies, better, and also sell better to enterprises, not just in India, but globally as well. The key pillars here, again, to reiterate, being how can Microsoft help you build better and scalable and secure technology and help you sell better to enterprise global customers. So on this note, I would love to welcome our speakers for the day. And to start with, I would love to invite Sandeep and Latika. Latika, thank you so much. Latika heads the VC and PE ecosystem at Microsoft. Thank you so much for joining us, Latika. I think it's a very important topic, a very relevant topic for in today's times. So I would love you to take it forward from here, for the quick chat with Sandeep to start with.
Thank you, Gautam. Thank you, Harshil and TiE Delhi. As Sandeep and I are both, on the board of TiE Delhi, and one thing that we realize is that at this particular point, there are a lot of founders out there who are struggling, and not just, it doesn't mean if you are at a seed stage, or at the Harshil stage, all of us are in the same boat. And one thing we believe, the way we can get through this a tsunami of sorts, is being there for each other, helping each other, and that could be as simple as being able to talk to each other about similar problems. Sandeep, over to you in terms of some of the initiatives that TiE Delhi is running to help support founders.
Thanks so much, Latika. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the forum. And as Latika was sharing, this has been an exceptionally tough time for everyone across the board. So, no matter what stage of life you are in, whether you are a student in a school or you are an entrepreneur or you are a corporate senior professional, I think all of us have been struggling in various shapes and forms with the new facets that keep unfolding every day, whether it's in friend circle or an extended network and so on. So we at TiE, basically, when we were looking at the whole thing, we were trying to figure out what are the 2 or 3 areas where we can, genuinely step in and help entrepreneurs from a few different dimensions. The first one was obviously, immediate and tactical need to say from a healthcare standpoint, if there is somebody who is struggling through basic resources, which unfortunately has become the case over the last few weeks, from reaching out to a concentrator, to an oxygen cylinder, to a bed in a hospital or an ICU, things that a lot of us took for granted, some time back, have suddenly become rare commodities. And in that sense, if anybody is in a need of, a solution like that or any resource like that, TiE has put together a forum where we can help you reach out, either from, access to basic resource, to a hospitalization, to a medical care, and so on and on. TiE has also joined hands with, healthcare firm Imoha, which has set up a 60-bedded facility in Gurgaon to be able to provide solutions and services like that. But I think the intent overall is to say, can we bring the access to healthcare resources to all the entrepreneurs, their friends, their families, and their extended system? The other part is in terms of the business mentoring, because this phase obviously has kind of shaped the each of the startups, each of the growth stage companies kind of very differently. The predictability on the revenues have gone for a toss. Any business plan that we did even a few months back are, all being, scrapped away, and people are figuring out how to take it forward. And at this point in time, being able to talk to somebody who has been through various phases of business, and lows of the business, their own experiences and some of the basic tips and guidance. And these charter members are some of the most esteemed professionals, entrepreneurs with a very credible and proven track record. And the idea of these sessions is actually not just to talk about business, because there are certain other aspects which might be running on your mind, just from your own mental health standpoint, like things that may be bothering you, things that you may be concerned about. So these are supposed to be some candid conversations, where you can block an hour with some of our chart members, come in and talk about almost anything under the sun. While the large focus is to be able to kind of keep the eye on the ball and figure out feel free livelihood, jobs, extended circle, some of the casualties, and how do we bring those people back to work? How do we create some financial solutions, even in some kind of a micro loan and things like that? How do we make sure that we can train some of the people in the digital ways of doing things, which we have not been doing in the past? How do we figure out some of the micro insurance policies so that the financial leverage can be provided for people to be able to extend it across your entire entrepreneurial ecosystem? So that's the other thread that we are working on right now. So overall, TIE is available as a platform for all of you, any shape or form to drop in.
I think we may have lost Sandeep.
These
Hi, Sandeep.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're going in and out.
So that was mostly it, Latika, from my side.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you very much. For those of you who joined in late, that is Sandeep Sinha from Loomis Partners, also on the board of TIE Delhi, talking about several initiatives that TIE Delhi has, which are in progress to help support founders like yourselves. My name is Latika Pai, and I head the venture capital and PE engagements for Microsoft here in India and support a lot of the startup activity across Microsoft. With us today, as part of Capital Circle and our Unicorn Workshop series, we have Harshil Mathur, who is the founder of Razorpay. Harshil, I know it's an extremely challenging time for you, and but despite that, when we first spoke to you about being able to have a candid conversation where you could, talk to us about the journey, your journey right now, and of course some of the tremendous success that Razorpay has had, would be, supremely beneficial to all the founders out there. Those founders who are on Event Builder, please click the link that's been put in the chat so you can come into the Teams call. We are looking for this to be an interactive session. Please put in your questions in the chat. We've kept it to a small group of founders so that you can really do an AMA with Harshil, which is ask me anything, and Harshil promises to answer to the best of his ability. So Harshil, thank you very much. My very first question to you, Harshil, is that how has the past 18 months been for you personally?
Yeah, thanks, Latika. Thanks for inviting, and hello to all the founders on the call. Yeah, I mean, the last 18 months have been a roller coaster ride for everyone, right? Like we have, and of course, there have been a lot of concerns across the ecosystem. People affected have been affected. A lot of people have been personally and affected in multiple ways with the pandemic. I think what I have seen is that what is most important in these times is to stay resilient, to be there for your family, for your team, for your community, and do what you can. Right. This is definitely one of the most eventful times that we have been through, and whatever you can do to help out, and it is just good to do that. In last 18 months, what we have seen families affected. We have seen a lot of people in the company affected. We have created, at least especially in the last 3 months, the second wave has been far worse. Where we have created, at least on the Razorpay side, we have created a war room internally to help people out, to help support employees and their families in finding beds, oxygen, tests, and so on and so forth. From the ecosystem perspective, we have created a lot of new initiatives to help people raise funds during the pandemic, to help people deploy funds during the pandemic through our Razorpay platform. And on the business side, of course, things have been impacted in various ways. But I think business is least of the worries in these times. The only thing on the business side is how do we ensure that the momentum keeps going? How do we ensure functioning well enough that we can't recover out of it? We have bigger problems in business, and we are trying to just ensure that people are impacted in whatever way we can support them. That has been there. From a pure business perspective, I think initially, of course, when the pandemic started, there was a lot of negativity. There was a lot of view on what will happen. And of course, there were news of job cuts, pay cuts, and everything across the ecosystem. Fortunately, as a company, we didn't have to do any of those. So we were able to sustain and keep all our jobs and ensure we didn't have to go through pay cuts and anything. We put in a plan to reduce the cash burn, to leave our vacant office spaces and stuff like that, so that things could go smooth. Fortunately for us, as the lockdown got lifted and market started opening up, but business saw really rapid growth because digital payments grew a lot. As people were staying at home, they bought most things to e-commerce, to online grocery, and all of things like that. And we saw a lot of growth out of that. In that case, we just restructured our strategy to focus on verticals that were growing during these times. So we changed our strategy a lot internally, directed our sales team away from segments like travel, which were not doing so well, to segments like e-commerce and grocery and online gaming, which were doing really well. And I think that allowed us to come out of, at least on the business side, we came out of the slowdown in the first month of March and April to a significant ramp up during the month of July, August, September. And we continue to see a rapid growth right now as well. So yeah, that is on the pure business side. But I think the speed noise. I can't hear you.
Yeah. So, Harshal, you've covered a lot in your first opening sentence, but the one word that I picked up, which is really important, is resilience. Right? You mentioned that individually resilient, to be there for your family, to be there for Razorpay, for you to be there for community. What were some of the things that you did to personally be resilient? Because I think as a founder, one needs to be Superman or Superwoman, right? Because, if you're trying to be there for everyone, how do you do it?
Yeah.
I mean, what are some of the tips that you have found useful to be resilient?
Yeah, see, I think the biggest skill set of a founder is like you have to solve a problem in a structured way, right? Like if you can try to help everyone yourself, it won't work. And like it's same way as you build a business, right? You can't solve every problem. I can't personally go out and solve every problem that Razorpay faces. What I have to do is create a right structure and right framework so that my team can solve it for me and I can oversee it. COVID is no different. We followed the same approach. So when you talk about people facing issues, and you saw in the early days of the second wave when people were facing issues with beds, oxygen, we restructured and created a dedicated team, or what we call the emergency response team. It's like a war room within Razorpay. It has people from different regions, some people from North in Delhi, some people from Mumbai, some people from Bangalore, and people from the HR team and multiple teams. And basically the goal of that team is to help employees, right? So if anybody is facing any issues with getting a test done, to getting oxygen availability and everything, they post to that team, and that team calls up people, searches Twitter threads, searches government contacts, calls them up, arranges those things, and help people out. So it's a structured solution there. Similarly, when we move further to talk about business problems, right now, so in the early days when we were not sure that how the market will grow, whether funding will dry out completely, where it will go, what we did was we created a 3-pronged plan for Razorpay, right? So what we did is we assumed 3 scenarios. We assumed a very conservative scenario where we assumed that the world will be extremely terrible for the next 3 to 4 years. Then we assumed an optimistic scenario where we assumed that things will go back to normal in 6 to 8, 10, 12 months. And we assume a realistic scenario where it will take 16 to 24 months. And right now we are all operating in the realistic scenario because while things went back to normal, after 6 months, they came back down again, right? And in all of these 3 cases, we said that, okay, this is the primary metric. So let's say we track our revenue, right? And if revenue is tracking across, is tracking in line with the realistic scenario, then we'll do these 3 things. If it moves towards conservative, then we'll do 3 more things here. If we move towards optimistic, then we'll unlock these 3 things. So we created that plan, and right now we continue to operate on that plan. So the world has initially, it was in a completely conservative scenario in March, April last year. Then August, September, we felt that, okay, we are moving towards an optimistic scenario because around November, December, we saw that things are coming back to normal. Travel started opening up, started getting back to normal. But then again, in March this year, we felt that things are moving back to realistic scenario where things are again closing down, shutting down. We are seeing lockdowns coming in place. So I think that worked well for us. I mean, the basic thing I want to say is that the pandemic scenario that we are operating in right now, it's not like your BAU, right? And things are not BAU till they're completely BAU. In a BAU, the way Razorpay or any organization would operate is that we create a long-term plan. We create a 12, 24-month plan, and we operate with that. Right now, long-term plans are out of the window. You don't know what will happen next month. You don't know what will happen next 3 months. You don't know what will happen in next 6 months, right? So what we have to operate with is what we call a war-like scenario, where you take decisions and you constantly recheck your position on where things are going and how do you need to change things to operate in that. So we are doing reviews every month to see where things are, how the business is tracking, how people are tracking, and then every month there's a change in strategy. We have a long-term plan in place, though the long-term plan is more fluid in the sense that, okay, these are 3-4 scenarios in which we could operate, but the rigidity on that plan comes every month based on what last month was, and that is the way founders need to operate in these times, because you can't operate a 12, 24-month plan in current times.
So, there's a question that Apurv put in, how do you maintain the momentum? I think, based on what you just said, looks like definitely business as usual is not happening. It is almost, would you say and agree that it's like, seat of the pants kind of decision making at some point? Because it literally in the past 6 weeks, all of us have seen a world, of past 8 weeks, seen a world that we've never seen before, right? It just unfold, in front of you. No longer is this news that you are reading about a train crash that happened, etc. This is that your friends, your family, your colleague, your neighbors, all who have been hit and struck. So that is something that I believe is so stressful on an individual. And I think the question is, how do you maintain the momentum? And Rahul has a question saying, how do founders maintain their own mental health? What are some of the tips that you could give these founders?
Yeah, so in terms of maintaining momentum, right? Like you still have to have as I said, it is a more fluid plan, but this has to be a plan, right? So every month we review, okay, these are for example, when I talk about Razorpay, one thing is you could take a back seat and let the world decide for us. Okay, we are a payments company. We power pay companies from travel to e-commerce to utility. Some of these segments are doing really, really bad, like travel. Some of these segments are doing really, really good, now, one thing is you could take a backseat and let the world unfold the picture for us, but that won't be the right way because you don't know where you're going. The other thing is that you sit there and you see, okay, these are the things that are doing well. So these are 4 verticals that are doing well. These are the 4 verticals doing bad. So we shifted our priorities, we shifted our teams, we shifted our energies into verticals that are growing and doing well in these times to ensure that whatever momentum we are losing out because of 4 verticals not doing well, we can gain on that with the 4 verticals that are doing well by refocusing and increasing our energy there, right? And that is how we are ensuring that as Razorpay, we continue to maintain the momentum. The harder part of maintaining momentum is not the external world, is more internal. When I review with my teams, I'll say at least 20 to 25% of my team today is directly or indirectly impacted by COVID, right? So either they have COVID or they have somebody in their close family has COVID and they don't have 100% resources available to them. So those are some things that you have to be okay with. That okay, the organization will operate at 70-80% efficiency because that's something you can't solve for. You can't really hire 30% more workforce suddenly. You can't ask those people who are impacted by COVID to come and work in these times. So you have to accept that okay, 20-30% efficiency of the organization is lost right now. But that's all right. It's a short-term impact. As long as the rest 70% is operating at the right efficiency, as long as you can give them the right priorities to focus on, people are able to come out of it. People are even people who have gone through COVID, taking rest, whatever they need, and then have come back more refreshed. Versus forcing them to do things when there's somebody in their immediate family is impacted, it is not productive for anyone anyway, right? So So that is harder to solve, and the only way to do that is accept that there will be some loss in momentum. No company can say that they're operating at 100% efficiency in these times, even if they try to, right? So be okay with the 10-20% gap that will come in, but find a way to, for people who are able to operate, people who are able to work, find a way to give them the right comfort and give them the right frame of mind where they feel comfortable working in these times, right? They don't feel that they're forced to or they're pressurized to. Coming to the mental health, it's a very well question. As a founder, you get all the bad news around you right now, and everyone I keep getting views that, okay, this person in our team is impacted by COVID, this person's family is impacted by COVID, and those things do take a toll. Way to do that is like keeping busy, and that's what has worked for me, right? And I've tried to keep busy, not just on the business, but trying to help people out whatever ways we can. So what can we do for the ecosystem at large? What can we do at large? What are the ways that I can contribute or give my time into these things? Because like if you step back and start thinking about these things, you can always go down the negative spiral. Like there's enough bad news in the ecosystem today. It's not just for founders or anyone. If you start reading bad news and you start spending time there, there's no end to it, and you can keep going down in a negative spiral. So the only thing is focus on the positives, focus on what you can do to help out, and spend your time there. Keep aware of what's happening in the system, but don't spend too much time in doom scrolling, right? Like you go on Twitter, you read the negative threads, and you keep going down that. There's no end to that journey, and it isn't really productive, right? So keep focus on the positives. Try to take breaks. Like it's easy when you're working from home as a founder, specifically, to work 24/7. It's for myself that even when I'm working from home, the Sunday is mine. I do things in my home, whatever else I can do, but I don't open my laptop that day. So those are things that are really important, and it's very important for founders to maintain that, because if you are not in your best mental state, you can't really inspire your team to be in the best mental state.
No, I think you're absolutely right. If all of us as founders, or even as being in the workforce, read the news. I think I stopped reading the news a long time ago, even before COVID, because everything I read was pretty depressing. And your point is extremely well taken, that if we were to channelize that energy in terms of helping, or even in a small way, just being there, for people in terms of being able to talk, I think that's really something which is very, very important. But one thing, Harshil, as Razorpay, you have the luxury of funds and funding. So for you, it is more of you know that you have reached a particular stage where you know that the next 12-18 months you will still be standing, right? Whereas there are many founders out there who do not have the luxury of funding. For them it is certain verticals are not doing well. That's almost like a choke, right? That they may not be standing in 6 to 8 weeks. What would you recommend for them? Because how much money do you keep putting into the business? How much loans do you take? Because if you're a 15, 20, 50% and 20-30% of your workforce is gone, your revenues have stopped. What do founders do, right? Because you want to do the right thing by your team. At the same time, you don't have the funds, and that's where I think many founders are grappling with how they should navigate these times, right? So that's what is your thoughts about that?
Yeah, see, first is at the start of pandemic, even we didn't know like how Razorpay will pan out, right? So we created a contingency plan, assuming everything could go wrong. Fortunately for us, you're right. Like we were in a vertical which was not that badly impacted. In fact, after the first 3-6 months, we saw a positive trend out of it. But we created a contingency plan for everything, right? So if you're a company which is very deeply impacted by COVID and to the point that it can't survive, you have to take hard calls. There's no second choice about it. Survival of the company is far more important, right? Like, see, if you're a 800-member company and your company completely shuts down, but if you can save your company by cutting, like, say, 10-20% of your workforce or 10-20% of your pay, you have to take the hard call, because at least some people will get a positive out of it. Otherwise, everyone is impacted. So if you have to take hard calls, if you are in that position, you have to create a plan. But the hard calls cannot be just like like it cannot be as simple as, okay, cutting workforce, right? There has to be a structured plan of cutting costs everywhere, right? So you have to leave offices, you have to cut all discretionary costs. For example, like the first thing you cut is all discretionary spending. You reduce your spending on marketing, you reduce your spend on things that are not directly productive to growth of business, spends that you were doing in BAU times, but you have to shut it down right now. So you cut those down. And if it comes to a point where you have to take hard calls on employees and people, then you do it in one go, right? A lot of companies in current times, you've seen that they have done that once, then 3 months later they had to do it again, and then 3 months later do it. That creates a very negative environment in the office, because then you lose even the best of your talent, right? So if you have to do it, like do it in one go, and give a very clear message to people why you had to do what you had to do, how can you help out in that situation, what can you do for them, and why that was the only option, right? Like if you're empathetic and if you are honest with people, people understand, right? Like if the choice is between shutting down the company versus taking a hard call, nobody will say you should just shut down the company, right? Like so if you have to take those calls, you have to figure that out. But what is most important is, like, you have to hustle your way through. This is a tough time, and while pandemic is tougher and different than usual, every startup goes through tough times, with or without the pandemic, right? Like every startup, including us, has gone through those times. The only way startups survive those times is by hustling through it. So figure out what is the best you can do. Get the core group of people that you know are properly motivated, to be honest with them that, hey, this is the time we are facing, and let's go through. Let me give you an example, right? Like as a company, as you said, like we are very well funded, but in the start of April, we didn't know. So we did our planning, and as per realistic plan, we felt that we need to reduce our cost to some way. So what we did is we did our employee appraisals, but we didn't do appraisals for our leadership team. So everyone in the organization except for our leadership team got appraisals in May. And we were honest with the leadership that, hey, if we were to do employee appraisals, we can't do leadership appraisals because both can't happen together. And the leadership was okay with that. They said that, yes, we can wait through this. Let the employees be not that much affected, because they will be far worse affected in these times. And that went through smoothly. In October, we were able to solve for leadership appraisals as well. But in April, May, that and no leader came forward and said that they had an issue with it. So be honest with people. Tell this is where the company is. This is what the situation is. And if we don't do this, we can't survive. People will understand.
So I think the messaging really is that be practical during this time, right? Be practical. You, as the founder, have clarity in terms of what your business is looking like. You know what your cash flow is, and you'll have to be practical on making the hard decisions. But at the same time, empathy is the one word that I think we all are hearing over and over again. That is at least.
And yeah, more important than that, honesty and transparency. Like, be honest with people. If you have to take hard calls, tell why you came, where you came. And there's no point of doing it in the background and telling people, yeah, everything is fine. And in the background, you're cutting jobs, you're cutting salaries and stuff. Just be honest and out in the open. If people feel that you are honest and transparent, at least the people who stay back, at least the people who are not impacted, will not feel unsafe. Because if you hear these things in the background and rumors, then everyone starts feeling unsafe. And that is the last thing you want.
True. This session is about wellness and about culture. And I think this is a fascinating one for me personally, right? How do you hire during a pandemic? How do you engage with your team virtually, especially the new hires who come on? What is the culture? It's like vaporware. In terms of the culture, you sit. I mean, some of the things I do is I always tell my team, I want your cameras on, because I kind of feel that I'm just talking to a blank wall if the cameras are not on, right? At least you can, you see a face, you can see some expression. But what has been your biggest challenge in terms of hiring during the pandemic, and also, in terms of quote unquote the culture and building the culture of Razorpay without being, in touch physically present with your teammates?
I see culture, even without the pandemic, like culture is a very important part of any organization, and it's something that shapes up whether you want it or not. There is, like, either you either you take an assertive action to take it into a certain direction, because even if you don't, the culture is shaping up, and it is always shaping up in the background in some shape and form. Every action, every direction that you do, and everything that you do, every direction that your team takes is shaping up your culture in some way. So the only way to ensure that you are in charge of where the culture goes is that to take assertive action, right? So what and the way culture works is like it's like business, right? There's no end date. Like, okay, you can't do 10 things and say now the culture is established, right? It's a work in progress. Like your business goals keep evolving over time. Same way your culture keeps evolving over time, and every year you have to do something different, something new as your company is growing, right? So when we were 10 team, like there's no clear definition of culture. Culture was what me and Shashank would do. People would look at that and understand that this is a razor-based culture. When we were 50 to 100 member, then we had to clearly define that these are the 5 things that our culture stands for. When we were 100 to 100 member team, then we had to define what those 5 things actually mean, because just saying, for example, just saying that transparency is not enough. You need to explain people what transparency means, because they are not seeing you around. Similarly, when you hit 1,000 people, just explaining things is not enough. You have to give examples. Okay, these are the things. If you do this in this situation, this is then you're standing by our culture. If you don't do this, you're not standing by. You have to give examples, because now just explaining and telling transparency is not enough, for example. And so it keeps shaping up, and at every milestone of the company's growth, it shapes up in a very different way. Similarly, when the pandemic happened and we all moved from work from home, as an organization, we have been operating for almost a year from work from home now, a year. And a lot of processes and structures had to change, because what shapes up culture and what I have realized is that more than the scheduled meetings and scheduled discussions, what shapes up our culture in a proper office setting is the background concerns that people have. The water cooler chats, the chit chat, how when you go to someone and say, hey, I need your help in this, how does he respond back? Those are the things that shape up your culture. Now, those are lost when you are working over Zoom. So what we had to introduce a lot of activities to replace that informal chatter that typically happens in the organization, to ensure that the culture is maintained. Today, almost 50%, like at least 55% of Razorpay's team hasn't been to the office ever. Like they have all joined remotely. They have all worked remotely only. They have never seen anyone's face, right? But I still feel that our culture is mostly maintained. And the reason for that is that a lot of these things that we introduced during the pandemic, first is, of course, maintain the continuity. And then we took a lot of assertive steps to maintain the culture. So we increased the amount of water cooler chats, the amount of fun events, the amount of frequency of all events that we do. For example, typically I used to do all the team once in 3 months. Now I'm doing it once every month. And almost every weekend there is 1 or 2 events where people get to see each other, people get to know each other. So those are the things that we have to introduce to replace the informal chatter that used to happen. We instructed all of our leaders to ensure that they do at least 1 or 2 informal sessions with their internal teams every month, because one of the challenges we saw is that typically when a new person joins in the org, the way they get to know each other and the way others get to know them is by being in the office. Now in Zoom calls, that's hard. So these informal chats are important for people to know the new people who have joined in, for the new people to know other people in the org, and create that warmth with each other, right? And yeah, things like having video on in meetings and stuff is important. And this is something that we also kept reiterating, that, hey, I understand if you have poor internet, but keep your video on as much as possible. I won't still culture remotely, but I think the essence of our culture that existed pre-pandemic has continued to stay true even today because of some of these steps.
So it seems that you can never ever replace, the water cooler chat and just the physical engagement. However, by kind of creating virtual moments which are more banter is what I think is really what you're encouraging, right? People pick up the phone, chat with each other, maybe nothing to do with work, but just to kind of recreate the water cooler chat. Rahul has a question for us, which he says that, do you think new remote working culture will sustain post-COVID? If yes, how will it impact employee productivity and engagement ahead? I have my own views. I'll wait to hear yours, and then I'll share that with the founders.
Yeah, so some of the things that we did was like like to maintain the culture is like, as you said, we had to create ways so that people can interact with each other informally. The mode of communication is Slack, right? So on Slack, we have different groups for people different interests. So there are groups for movies, there are groups for sports, there are group for poker, group for gaming, and people chat with each other when whoever is interested in that topic. And the activity on Slack has gone up tremendously during COVID because people are also bored, right? Like it's not like people have their own busy lives and who wants to do this. Most people are staying at home. There's lockdown in place. They're not able to go out. So a lot of people themselves are also bored and they're looking for these routes where they have personal interest in activities, right? And those chats have gone up significantly. But like coming to Rahul's question, right? I think first is if I talk about productivity, right? Like short term because Zoom calls and stuff are more fast, more productive in short term. But long term, I think it's not great because the culture deletion, long term people burn out a lot. That's what we are seeing. Everyone work from home. Right now, when we do a survey that who wants to come to office, everyone, almost 80% of our workforce says they want to come back to office because people are really tired, right? So I think long term, we'll see a mix of things. There are productive advantages of work from home and we'll want to maintain those. So for example, people could do 1 or 2 days or 3 days work from home. But at the same time, there are advantages of seeing each other's faces. There's an advantage of meeting each other and building that bond. So I think long term, my view is that we'll have a hybrid sort of working setup where people could work from home and we always allowed work from home, but people could have more direct work from home for 2 or 3 days in a week, but 2 or 3 days it could be completely in office. And in that kind of hybrid workplaces will come up, which will build the best of both worlds, maintain productivity, but at the same time drive engagement and try to see how can we maintain a balance in both things. I think that is my opinion, but we'll still have to see how it shapes up once we are out of the pandemic.
No, I'm glad, Harshil. That's also my opinion. That which is a hybrid workforce, workplace needs to exist. I think some of the larger companies like TCS, who's come out and said by 2022 it's going to be completely remote. I think it's a real challenge. I think it's unfair, especially to working parents, mothers, young dads trying to manage in the space that they have. I know how harrowing it is. I'm glad. I mean, my kids are much older, but it's still annoying to have them around, right? When you're on call, you want to be able to get away, and that has really been, the power of being able to go into a work environment which is sacred, where you're working, you're not being constantly interrupted by a family member or a cook or a staff member. Constantly. So I'm glad
just on that thing, Lalita, like let me give a bachelor's opinion as well on that. I think the bachelors carry similar view, but for different reasons, right? For a lot of bachelors, like I am that, and I see a lot of young folks in our organization. For them, a lot of social life came out of working in office. When they would come to office, at the end of the day, they would go out for drinks with friends. They would go out for chats with friends. They would go out for dinners. A lot of young engineers in our organization, like a lot of their social life came out of office itself, right? Without office, they didn't know where to meet new people, and they'll have to take a lot of effort to do all of that. So it's not just like the family folks who are missing working from office. The bachelors miss it equally because for them also it was one of the best places to get access to a social life.
No, you're right. I think the ones who are single are the ones who are really, really, had to, after a few months. I know a couple of people on my team who said, listen, I've had it. I can't be alone in my apartment on my own. I'm going back to be with my family. Of course, once he reached home, he said, I've had it. I don't know. I can't deal with being with my parents. So it's a very odd space and time, right? Either whether you're single, etc. So I completely agree with you that a workspace which is hybrid, where people, employees have a choice to come in if they wish to, or the choice to stay at home and work. I think that would be the ideal situation, where they come in. I think one of the other things that I find is that, in the past, you had these big tech hubs like Bangalore and Gurgaon and, in Hyderabad, etc. What I'm hoping is that as a result of this, that we can move away from having these large tech hubs in cities, allow for opportunities, for growth opportunities in tier 2, tier 3 cities. So people are closer to their families. They are able to afford better lifestyle. Like I always said, people who had a comfortable lifestyle in a tier 2, tier 3 city come to Bangalore, for a job, and then find it very difficult to make, pay their rent, etc. from the salaries. What do you believe as that opportunity, kind of creating small co-working spaces where people can leave their home, go into these small co-working spaces where they have an office, but they don't have to come to Bangalore? Do you see something like that evolve over the next, post-pandemic?
Yeah, definitely. And for multiple reasons, right? One is that, of course, as you move to a hybrid workforce, the need for that one large central hub will diminish, because the organization will have how to work remote. And pandemic has forced them on how to create the process and structure so that you can operate completely remotely. And as that comes into place, having that large central tech hub would go away. The second is, of course, the rising levels of pay, competition, and all of those things in the large tech hubs is forcing a lot of companies to anyway explore this. So from an organization perspective as well, they're looking for smaller towns, smaller centers where it's easier to hire, easier to retain talent, and easier to pay the talent out of their pockets. Because in larger tech hubs, that is also becoming increasingly difficult. Like for large funded startups like us, it's still okay. For a lot of young companies that I speak to and it's extremely hard. They can do that in remote towns, in smaller towns. It will be far cheaper and far more cost effective. So because of this, like both sides, like employees prefer it because they want to stay from where they come from, and also because employers prefer that because from their perspective, it will be cheaper to hire and retain talent. I think because of these things, this will definitely happen.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, because we need unicorn founders like yourself to lead the way, to show the way that you don't all have to be in tier 1 cities. I personally will be happy to see less traffic on Bangalore roads, post pandemic. Harshal, over to your journey with Razorpay, right? You're now at the coveted unicorn status. Tell us a little bit more about how you started Razorpay. From your first round of funding to your latest round of funding. What were the differences in your headspace, right? I know, again, being a founder, the first time you raise money is just like you literally climb the highest peak, and then you wonder why you did it, because now you have investors breathing down your neck, right? So what are some of those anecdotal experiences that you can share with the founders?
Yeah, so I started the company almost right out of college. I had worked for 7 months in a job before I left it and moved to Jaipur, my hometown. My co-founder Shashank was working in Microsoft in Seattle for about 2 years. He left his job and came to my hometown, and both of us started building Razorpay from Jaipur, right? And the early days were, of course, a lot more fun, but with a lot of stress as well, because we didn't know what will happen to the company, but we enjoyed doing what we both loved, right? There's nobody to answer, there's nobody to take care, there were no employees, there was no investors, nothing. It was just the two of us working out of my parents' home and trying to build some things, right? Then we launched. We got the first round of funding from Y Combinator, and I remember like we made the first hires at that point of time, and the first 8-9 people that I hired were all my friends, like people I knew from college, who I had worked with, and who I knew that like I can trust them in the early days of the company, and they trusted me, more importantly, to join a company which was very, very early stage, right? So the first 8-10 people came out of that. We all moved to, after that funding, we all moved to Bangalore, and we all lived together. So we took a large house in Bangalore. We all lived together and worked together in that same house, like about 10 of us. Of course, this was the time there was a lot of action, a lot of hustle, a lot of things going on. It was just a lot of energy in that small space. But of course, things were still much less certain. So there was a lot of risk as well. But it used to be fun. I think from there, of course, we raised the Series A round of funding. And that was a big landmark for us because we were still a fairly small company, and this was a large round of funding, right? And a lot of time when people read this news, it seems like people read about it, it feels like that we must have felt that, hey, we have achieved some big milestone. It was actually extremely opposite of that. We were doing like less than $1,000 or $2,000 per month in revenue, and we had raised the Series A term sheet at the valuation of about 35 million. And I remember coming out of that meeting, and I spoke to Shashank and said that while yes, they have funded us and it's a pretty good valuation, but we'll have to grow into that valuation, and we'll have to put a lot of effort and energy to grow into that valuation. So it was not a feeling of achievement; it was more a feeling of obligation that, hey, somebody has paid that much price for the size of the company that we are in. Unless we grow up and prove that yes, we can meet this valuation, things will go extremely terrible, right? And most founders I speak to are aware of this, right? Even when founders get, I mean, right now, of course, the market is even hotter, right? So when founders get enormous valuation, when I speak to them, most founders are aware of the obligation it brings, right? That yeah, sometimes markets will give you great valuation early on, but that is not an achievement in itself, right? You celebrate it within your team, you celebrate it with the media and everything, but in their own minds, founders know, and that is important to be honest about it with your co-founder at least. That okay, while this has all happened and it's good to celebrate, there's a lot of work ahead of us. And with every funding milestone that has happened, right? So right from that to even when we became a unicorn, both me and Shashank have been extremely honest with each other that on what this means, on what this funding means, and what we'll have to do to ensure we maintain this momentum, right? Like, because funding in itself is not like, doesn't really do anything for us. Like, we have had companies who have gone through a great round of funding and then there has been significant downfall after that. So unless you can maintain that momentum, and essentially funding is an obligation that either you maintain a momentum or things will go bad in a very public way. If you are a non-funding startup, you scale up to $1 million of revenue, you scale back down to $100,000 of revenue. You don't have to answer anyone, you don't have to tell anyone. But when you are funded to that extent, if things go bad, everyone in the world will know. And everyone will question back you on that. And there are enough people who will say that, hey, we always knew that this company won't do well, right? So it brings its own set of obligations. But one thing is straight true for us, every funding round, is that me and Shashank have been extremely honest with each other. That this is what this means. This is what we'll have to do for the next phase of growth. And these are the 5-10 more things that we have to do now that we are funded to this extent.
So now that you've reached, you've raised which series? Is it D, E? I forget.
E. The last round we raised was Series E very recently at a $3 billion valuation.
That was in April, early April?
April this year, yeah.
So the good news now, Harshil, is that we're actually seeing a few IPOs being discussed, right? One thing that we have been seeing in the Indian ecosystem is there have been very, very few IPOs. And it's really, I know there are a lot of employees out there who are, not quite happy because the founders have had their exit, but the employees are sitting on shares which have been worth, haven't really panned out well for them. I know some of the other larger unicorns have made sure that all employees got exit along with the founders. What are your thoughts? Two things. One is that, a great example is Infosys. When Infosys went public, like literally, the story was Narayan Murthy's driver also made money off it, right? In terms of it had become a crorepati because of the shares that he got. What are yours and Shashank's thoughts about, how do you create wealth for your team that has been with you? How do they actually leverage what you have done? And how do you plan to do that if, IPO is the best way of doing it? So, if there isn't an IPO, is there an IPO, potentially in the cards? And if there isn't an IPO, what are your thoughts about making sure that your team also gets to really benefit with these valuations?
Yeah, no, definitely. That is an important question, and I keep talking about a lot about this. That as a ecosystem, India hasn't seen a lot of employees making a whole lot of money just out of working in a startup, right? Like there have been stories here and there in companies like Flipkart and stuff, but few and far in between. And it is really important to solve that as an ecosystem because if people don't believe in that story of making wealth by joining an early stage startup, then we can't really have that great ecosystem of early stage startups keep constantly coming up in the country. What we have done is two things. First is that we have a very structured ESOP plan, which is very favorable to employees. So we have, for example, we have monthly vesting after a year. We don't have things like 1 year vesting and stuff like that. We have very less restrictions on selling, actually no restrictions on selling. We have a very long exercise window and all of those things. So create a very employee-friendly ESOP plan. And that is the first step, that everyone gets ESOPs and gets it in a very clear fashion. There is a lot of stories of people promising ESOPs but not getting it and stuff like that. So everything has to be on paper, and people need to get those ESOPs written down on a sheet of paper when they're offered that. Second thing is that like IPO and exit is a very, very, very long-term way of making money out of ESOP, and that needs to change, because like today IPOs, while there is a talk of that, typically IPOs happen at least in 10, 12 years of the company, which is a long time. If somebody is joining a startup at the age of 25, you say that you will make money when you're 35 or 40. That to a 25-year-old guy, that seems like retirement income, right? And that's not very exciting, right? Like most of his life events, marriage, kids, everything will happen by that point of time, right? And that's not very exciting, right? So, so what needs to happen is that there needs to be constant and continuous points where wealth generation happens, right? And what we have done as Razorpay, like we did our first employee buyback right after our Series B round. So just after a Series B round, which was when the company was about $100 million in valuation, we did our first research buyback. And unlike Infosys and other things, what Razorpay had was that the first people who made money out of Razorpay stock was not investors, were not founders, was employees. Because at that point of time, there was no secondary for investors that had happened. There was no secondary for founders that had happened. The first people who made money out of Razorpay stock were employees, because they were offered the first chance to sell. And we have done a buyback every year from that year. So at Series B, we did the first buyback. Last year, we did our second buyback. And this year, in Jan-Feb, we did our third and largest buyback of about $10 million, where people could sell up to $10 million of ESOPs that they held. And a lot of people made a very huge amount of money in that buyback. Like there were people who held about $1 million of stock that they could sell in that buyback, right? So, and I think those are the things that need to happen in the ecosystem, because that, and as we have done this like every year, people's trust in our ESOPs has gone up significantly, right? Like when we do conversations around appraisals, around reviews, around salaries, almost everyone discusses a lot more about ESOPs than they discuss about salaries now, because people know that this ESOP carries a lot of value, and they've seen that it has grown by 5x, 10x, 20x in the last 2-3 years. And there is actual liquid value that they can get out of it, because we do constant buybacks where people can sell and get liquid cash when they want it. So because of that, conversation has shifted away a lot towards ESOP, which is great both for employees as well as for the startup. Because when people take ESOPs, they are in it for more long term. They are in it for the raise. Like ESOPs grow only when Razorpay itself grow. Well, salary gets paid out either ways, right? So it is great for the company. It is also great for employees, because the kind of wealth generation that can happen out of ESOP is significantly more than you can ever have out of salary, right? Salary can grow 20% a year, 30% a year, 50% a year, but ESOPs can, in an organization like Razorpay, it can grow by 300%, 200% in a year, right? And so it's great for employees. It's great for the startup, and we need to have more such events happening. So as Razorpay, like for example, we have given that commitment to people that whenever we raise a new round of funding, we'll try to find a way to do an ESOP buyback right after that, even no matter how big or small, so that people have that continuous ways of generating wealth whenever the organization is growing in value. And I think that creates a very strong positive view inside the organization as well as outside it, because now when people are trying to join Razorpay, we discuss them about ESOPs and we tell them that, hey, we have done 3 buybacks already. We'll do a buyback. So this is not just value on paper. This is not retirement money. This is money that you can make next year. Right? So that is important. Coming to a question about IPO, I think when we do that, then employee exit and IPO are 2 separate problems, and we don't need to correlate them. So employees can keep making money no matter how long Razorpay takes for an IPO. So when we separate that out, for us, the way to do an IPO is, or the framework to use to decide when we should do an IPO is that when we feel that we are in the right structure of our vision. Today, Razorpay is a big player in the payment space. We are one of the largest players in the payment space, but we are still fairly early in the banking and lending side. And our goal or our vision as an organization is to build the full stack financial platform for businesses. So for that, we need to scale up our lending and banking activities as well, which is still, while it has shown good early traction, it's still 2 to 3 years away. So we'll wait for 2 to 3 years to stabilize that. And then from there, we can think about an IPO. So that is how we think of an IPO, but it's completely different from employees' liquidity right now.
Wow. So no, I'm very excited to hear that employees are able to cash out through the various rounds, because I think very frequently many employees talk about the fact that they're sitting on a whole bunch of ESOPs that never went anywhere, or they're still hoping that it'll go somewhere at some point if there's a secondary that happens. So I think message to all those founders out there. I think a very important point that Harshil made is that the employees were the first one to have the opportunity to cash out over the founders or investors, which is, I would say, one very unique. And I must congratulate Harshil and Shashank, because as founders, they must have put that in their term sheet to ensure that employees enjoyed that. My last question for you, Harshil, is that, and for the audience, we are on a Teams chat. Please feel free to turn on, your video. Or if you don't feel like turning on your video, turn on your audio. We have Harshil for a few more minutes. Please really leverage this time to ask him questions. He's been very gracious to give us the time, and this is for all of you out there in the audience. And so while you're waiting to ask him the question, Harshil, where do you see Razorpay? I know you mentioned that you're looking at not just payments, but being a full stack, financial services company, right? More importantly, are you looking for global growth, or do you see enough of action in India that you don't even have to bother about other markets?
So it's a twofold problem, right? First priority is definitely India, and we want to go very deep into the Indian ecosystem, right? So the goal of building the full stack financial platform that is specifically for businesses in India, that any business, if you start tomorrow a small business in India or a startup in India, you can sign up with Razorpay, and Razorpay can take care of your entire financial ecosystem, right? From payments to banking to lending to managing payroll, managing vendor payments, corporate credit card, everything for you. So you can focus on your core business. But in each of these segments, as we grow up and scale and reach a leadership position in India, we'll try to see, are there other markets where you can leverage these products? So today, our payments platform has scaled up a lot, and we are one of the largest players for SME payments in India. So that is something we are trying to take to other markets in Southeast Asia. And before the end of this year, we launch in at least 1 or 2 markets. And that's only on the payment side, because we feel that we are hitting leadership position in India, and it feels like the right time for us to spend our energy on that side, on other markets in Southeast Asia as well. And that will be the journey that we'll carry for payments and from banking and lending and everything else as well. That as the first focus will be India, to achieve leadership position in India. And when you hit that and we are comfortable with that, then move that out to other markets in Southeast Asia, where problems are similar, challenges are similar, and we can use the learnings that we have had in India, the products that we have developed in India, to win those markets as well. I believe Southeast Asia markets like Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam are very similar to India, but a couple of years behind India in terms of the kind of problems they are facing, in terms of the kind of development issues that they face, more especially from a payments and banking perspective. So it is the right time for us to expand some of these products to that market.
No, I completely agree with you. I work very closely with the Southeast Asian markets, and definitely the good news is, whether it's the Middle East or Southeast Asia, they all look to India for guidance, right? Indian startups have shown the way. They don't look at Silicon Valley because it's a completely different. China is very different, and Israel, the third relevant ecosystem, is made to export, right? Whereas India is clearly showing the way Indian startups on creating solutions for the country, and also really in terms of the capabilities that our startups have, like Razorpay is phenomenal in terms of scaling. Harshil, thank you very much for your time. I think, to wrap up for our audience here, we have Harshil Mathur, the founder of Razorpay. Some of the key takeaways are: 1, these times are turbulent for all of us, not just you out there in the audience. For Harshil, for me personally. 2, be resilient, create the resilience by being there for you, first and foremost for yourself, B, for your family and your team and the community. As you keep giving of yourself and keeping on spending your time, helping others, that will at least take your mind away from the fierce reality about what's going on in the ground. And 3rd, I think most importantly, I can see it on Harshil's face. despite the pandemic, he's making sure that he is still being useful, right? In multiple ways, and keeping himself in a way that he can continue to motivate himself personally and his team. So thank you everyone for being a part of the Capital Circle, Microsoft's engagement with VCs and private equity partners, and also with all your startups. We look forward to engaging with all of you on our series of workshops that we have. Harshil, thank you again. Really appreciate your time and good luck.
Thank you, Latika.
Thanks.